Welcome to the Fischer-Z 50th anniversary audio series, where I've picked my favourite tracks over the years, and I'm going to share the story of those tracks and a lot more.
Welcome to the episode. For those that don't know, my name is Martin Bull, and I'll be hosting and helping John curate his way through all of his favourite tracks. Now, today's episode is a special introductory episode featuring the lead up and the story of Pretty Paracetamol.
Pretty paracetamol, you soothe my aching brow. I need you when my head is spinning round. I look into the looking glass, but none of them was me. It takes at least an hour to put me down. First impressions often lie. They often fool a naked eye. I hold you gently on my tongue, and then you drift away. It's hard to read the writing on the label. I force my hands out sideways, but I can't resist the strain, and it don't help me. No, it don't help me. First impressions often lie. They often fool a naked eye. I think I recognize a friendly face I've seen before. I'm floating far too quickly to be sure. Don't you disentangle in a web to stay.
So let's get into it.
Yeah.
So, John, how did you choose your favourite tracks for this? How tough was it?
In many ways, I would choose tracks A, that I like, and B, I can relate to, and C, that I want to play live. Because if they mean that much to me from different eras, then I still play them. When we do shows whereby they're a themed show, like I did for one of the solo tours, I did a Red Skies theme, and I played everything from Red Skies. I can play them all. And then I did, on the last Dutch solo tour, I did most of the things from Going Deaf for a Living. Some songs I can relate to, some songs I just can't really, I don't play them live unless I can really relate to them. So it's a question of liking them and also feeling close enough to them and feeling that they still relate, because a song never gets old, an arrangement gets old.
What about any tracks that were sort of close to making it? Was there any near misses, notable mentions?
Well, if I have to pick from the overall catalogue, when I was thinking originally, you're thinking about 50th anniversaries or this, that, and the other. There are probably 50 tracks that I relate to in a very strong way. So I could do 4 completely different sets of stuff that I like and that I think is like Premier League stuff for me.
So there's 50 songs out of all of your catalogue that you feel that you can relate to now, and the rest you can't relate to.
Well, I don't relate to it so strongly. I can play them all. When I put together sets for gigs, I look at all the different lists. In the solo shows, especially in the theatres, it gives me more scope because I can play all of them. I can play that I like playing, probably 120, 150 of them. But I need to see the words and the chords, because I can't remember the words for everything. It's absolutely hopeless. And also, but again, if you're just singing, you remember the words. And if you're just playing guitar, you remember the chords, but you don't remember both. And I change the keys of things to which makes it more suitable for my voice.
I was going to ask about that. Is that must have changed over the years, I'd have thought.
Yeah. I've lost 6 notes at the top and I've gained about 10 at the bottom. I actually am more fond of my voice now than when I was younger. I can still sing the high stuff, which surprises people.
Right.
After the voice.
All right. Well, should we start with the first track that's on the list, which is Pretty Paracetamol, back from 1979. So, where were you at this point? What was the story of the band up to that point?
Well, I mean, up to that point when we were doing that, we had, well, in the very beginning, we had been, I'd been at Brunel University with Steve Skolnik, and we'd played bits and pieces as a duo. And then we eventually put a band together, which was very briefly called Sheep. And we were very lucky to get Steve Little from an ad, because he came from Uttoxeter. At that stage, he played in all sorts of bands, but he wanted to come and be part of a new wave punk band. He was a very good player. He could play good funk stuff and everything else. And he came down with his, he changed from whatever he'd been before, but he had his leather jacket and his relatively punky red hair and all that kind of shit. And he ended up playing with us. And we were not. We had all the energy of the punk and the new wave stuff, but we weren't either of those things. I mean, I now define it as art punk. Things like Gang of Four get defined as art punk. Things like Talking Heads get defined as art punk, right? And so we did that. But at that stage, Steve had been playing piano, and like, for instance, the first things we did, we went to a place like Amsterdam when I was 20, and we went over and did that, and as a kind of duo, and I'd play some guitar, or actually, I can't remember, I was playing sort of drumsy thing, I think, at one stage, because I was a drummer in the beginning. But we did that. And once we got into the band stuff in like, 75, 76, once we got Steve, we were then, it then became, we did the first, well, it's 50 years next year. We did the first Fischer-Z shows as Fischer-Z in 76. And we got Dave Graham in as well. The thing that was difficult for bands in those days is you couldn't get bass players. And Dave was a very good bass player. He wasn't a very good personality fit, but he was a great bass player. In the band, because we still had an extra guitar player up until just before the first album. Mark Schofield was in the band. He was a very good guitar player, and his heroes were people like Jimmy Page, so he could play widdly twiddly things. But just before we got into doing the album, we decided that it had to be more direct. And I'd been singing and playing. I've been playing acoustic, I think. I bought a Telecaster not long before we did the first recordings, in fact, and then. Obviously, then we had to get rid of Mark, and the band then became a very different entity. Because in most bands, a lot of the melodies, the guitar work, I was like a drummer, so the rhythm section was more to do with my guitar playing with the drums, and that left Dave Graham chance to play melodic. He played bass melodies, hooks, and Steve Skolnik was playing the other. There was a lot of melody from both the keyboards and the bass. And in most new wave and punk bands, that element wasn't there. And that gave us an accessibility to lots of other markets. The reason we got very big in Europe very quickly, in continental Europe, was the other new wave bands had the energy and the stuff which related to Britain, but they didn't have the melodies. And they didn't, that other people whose first language is not English could relate to. I mean, it was ridiculous. We were playing shows where, for instance, we had the Cure were backing us up, and we saw all the different bands, but we were our career accelerated so much in Europe on a level with the Police and with Dire Straits. But it was the melody of it, and obviously, if you get the first tune, if you're talking about Pretty Paracetamol, that's essentially a keyboard tune. And the interesting thing to talk about with that really is that was encouraged. We had our first producer who did Wax Dolls was Richard Gottra, who I regard as a genius, who started Sire Records. He produced the Ramones, he produced Blondie. He was a genius. And he came to see us. There's a very good story about the Speakeasy in London where he came to see us to decide if he wanted to produce us or not. And there was a big Sid Vicious incident, which I've written about in different places. That's written up in a lot of the punk stories. There was a big battle between Sid Vicious and Paul Weller at our show, where Weller bottled Vicious. But it's in all the annals of punk, but nobody realizes that was at a Fischer-Z show. But anyway, right. Gottra was there. I wanted to work with him, and he did Wax Dolls, and he did it brilliantly. But then he was busy, and our A&R man at UA was Martin Rushent, and he was ill and in the Far East. And so we had young people looking after us, young A&R people working, and they decided to bring in Mike Howlett. Now, it was good and bad. It was good in as much as Mike Howlett was gong and a bit sort of, progressive stuff. He wasn't what I would see ideally as a producer for Fischer-Z, but he obviously encouraged the keyboardy sense of it. And he didn't like noisy electric guitars at all. And live-wise, my noisy electric guitar, along with Steve's melody, was the thing that drove it. But he played that down. So that was bad. But what was good was it did mean the mixes of the first Fischer-Z record sounded like nobody else at all. Word Salad was very, very original. The electric guitar was there, but it worked mainly around the keyboard stuff and the songs. But the energy and the way I put things over, which was more theatrical is the wrong word. I mean, I have relatives that were in the music hall in the 30s, for instance, and I'm a performer. And it was very unfashionable, new wave people. Punks, you're just supposed to stare at the audience. You weren't supposed to entertain. I mean, we had a very famous big show at Reading Festival where the band before us, Brian James's Helions, they were bottled off by a predominantly biker audience. And I went on and they were still throwing things at us. And I just talked to them. I was banging my head on the microphone and saying, look, I'm fed up with you. This, that, and the other. You can throw things at us if you want. I don't care. And I hate you, basically. You're a bunch of bikers. You're a scum. And then I asked them if they had any motorbikes. And I entertained the crowd there. We're very successful with Fischer-Z. And that got slagged in things like NME. They said it was patronizing. But for me, in the end, we had a really good show and they really enjoyed it. And most people can't do that. I think that live performance should be entertainment in whichever form you do it. It's not about playing your records. It's not about playing things like albums. It's one-off. Those people, that place, that day. But when coming back to the record, so basically, I thought the production of the record was a bit weedy compared with what we did. It was a bit academic. Mike wanted me to do the worker really high because I could. I didn't want to do it that high. I've never liked that recording. When we do it now, I've always done it lower, not because I can't, not because I couldn't sing it, but it was reviewed. You've probably seen the review of it as a monkey on helium. And I think that really offended me because I had the power. Not only could I sing high, but I also had the power. And it was a bit, I don't know, the album was a bit tidy.
I think some of the critics were quite unfair, saying, like a monkey on helium and so on. But do you think it affected the view of the band? Do you think they took it seriously?
Yeah, no, I think it affected the view of the band. Anybody that's seen us live, which is what we get. I mean, people like mate of mine, Kirk Brandon, Spear of Destiny, Theatre of Hate. Kirk had seen us live and they knew what we were like. And lots of artists had. And when we got that criticism, that's associated with the worker again. Robert Smith, apparently, because we've been on tour together, went into an NME and said, "What the fuck are you talking about?" He was really annoyed. Bless him. I haven't seen him in his adult era. I'll catch him one day. Mike Howlett and Paracetamol. The one thing that's funny about Paracetamol is at that stage I'd never played electric guitar much. And muting, if you're playing rock and roll guitar, most people are not very good at muting the guitar and playing it. Because I've been a drummer, my rhythm guitar is good. I don't claim to be anything else. But the muting technique, Mike Howlett on Paracetamol, because if you're going ding, 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 you've got to mute it. And so he encouraged me to do that. And that was one good technique I picked up. I mean, most people stick bits of foam and stuff on, but that's cheating. So I mute it with my fist, and that gives you terrific dynamic, and you use it a lot in reggae as well. So basically, I didn't get on that well with Mike Howlett in the first record, and then he made the second one with Going Deaf for a Living. But the stuff, and again, that changed. But his favouring keyboards over guitars and going against where the band was going was the main reason we lost Steve Skolnik, because it forced me and Steve against one another. It was very political in that sense. I'm so fond of Steve, always have been. He's my big brother.
Right, and that's a regret for you, is it?
Yeah, because if I'd have been more grown up in that stage, I'd have stood up against that and wouldn't have allowed it to happen. As it happens, we did the 2 records with Mike Howlett. And then I said to him, I'm not working with him anymore. I'm going to do it. And they said, well, you'll have your big failure. Of course, we did. I did Red Skies. I produced Red Skies, and we sold 10 times as many records as anybody before. So, but that was a massive problem for me because it dropped me into a situation where nobody would ever say anything to you. I was doing everything.
When was the song written?
Paracetamol was one of the early sets that we played. There were 2 or 3 songs which didn't make the first records. Remember, we're doing English bands play lesser sets, less long sets. I mean, they do again now. I mean, I see a lot of the bands that come from the music schools, and they do about 35, 40 minutes. We were doing that, but that's what you got when we do all things like the Rock Garden in London and the Speakeasy and all the usual, the marquees. That's what you did. You did 30 or 40 minutes, which was basically your first album. In our case, Paracetamol was always there from the beginning. There were other things we did which didn't make the album. Curse of the Angels, Angry Brigade, lots of things like that. yeah, essentially we were playing it from the beginning, and it was really funny because I always thought that if you listen to it, if you listen to the way the keyboards are played, I think that that riff and the way of doing it was actually it was a keyboard version of the Sex Pistols. Ding 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 ding. I am an Antichrist, wasn't it? Yes, it's like that. And I just thought it was really funny. It was on keyboards, but live it had this massive electric guitar chug underneath, which people would have seen going. Ding, 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 ding. And that was not something that was predominant on the record. There was weird guitar on it, the nice swirly weird stuff, but I always felt that the first record lacked punch and power, but it certainly had character, and that was down. I mean, Mike was good at that, and it certainly got us noticed. Also, we could play reggae. Most white bands were very, very, very embarrassing, and we were on tour with and switching gigs with the police, so we could hack reggae. And Remember Russia was the first thing that was picked up by John Peel, and it was picked up across Europe. And after Remember Russia, we went from playing like our first. We went straight to Europe, and we our first gig, for instance, was in Holland before Germany. Can't remember, but I think we played a little gig in somewhere like Apeldoorn to about 40 people. That was great. We were introduced in, and then Remember Russia was being played on John Peel, and then 2 days later we played the Milkveg at 600. So it went mad. And we had an indie reputation in continental Europe that we didn't have in England. Although ironically, now I talk to people, for goodness sake, a friend of mine, Jim Irvin, who was the Mojo editor until quite recently, and he was in a band called Furniture. And I had no idea. I've been meeting people. I didn't live in London, and I wasn't part of the London scene. So many of my contemporaries I've never met. I've met people I should have met, like in my 60s. Who were doing the same thing that I never met them. They knew who Watsy was, and they thought I was a psychopath rather than a psychologist. And everybody apparently seemed to have a lot of respect for Fischer-Z. So Jim Irvin said, "Oh yeah, my favorite record at that time was Pretty Paracetamol." And there's a whole generation of people that were probably maybe 2 or 3 years younger than me, because we just left university, who came to all the university shows, who are, I think, form the main basis of people who follow us in England. The fact that the greatest number of people, the greatest country represented on our mailing list is Britain. And that's amazing, considering you'd think it would be the other way around. And for me, that soiree into Europe, I mean, Paracetamol was big. Remember Russia was successful. The Worker was successful. So those things got us going in Europe. But also it was in England. People forget. People say, well, you didn't get going. We did. I mean, we were at the stage whereby when we did Red Skies, we were playing to more than 1,000 people twice in London on this, in the same venue. So for me, that was nothing compared with what was going on in Europe. And remember, we never did the Red Skies tour because I left the band. So people say, well, Red Skies didn't take in England. They had it all ready to go. Anne Nightingale was behind it. They had it playlisted. Marlies was going to be playlisted right across Radio 1 and everything. And I left. So it never was given a chance in that sense. Right. So Red Skies was a failure in Britain. We just didn't do it. But no, going back to Paracetamol, yeah, that was part of the first bunch. When I hear Paracetamol, I can always see Steve. I haven't seen much of Steve recently. I got to a situation where after with the split up with things, we got back together. He, as you probably know, he came on tour with us in 2004, 2005. He never understood why we split up. And one thing that's funny, he's been in many different businesses. He's a very wonderful human being and incredibly talented. But the thing is, everything he touches, he has great ideas, turns to gold. He said, Watsy, if you'd stay with me, you'd be very rich. You'd have a big house. I love him to death. As you know, obviously, knowing about me, I've done the opposite to most people. Most people have their brand and they cling to it with it by their teeth. They do everything they can to exploit that name to its greatest possibilities. Yeah. I always felt that if music changed, the name should change. But in the era that I started, but nowadays you see, I mean, what I do realize now, whatever I do is Fischer-Z. That's what I do. Yeah. I mean, the band thing. Do you remember bands like, what was he called? Spiz Oil, Atletico Spiz 80.
Oh yeah.
What would have understood? I mean, everybody said this to me. You can imagine how many journalists have said this to me in Europe. They said you should have been Fischer-Z. Always, you are Fischer-Z, and they should never have even known what the name was. John Watts is Fischer, like, that's who he is. And you can do anything you want. I also was after splitting up the Fischer-Z then, I didn't use the name for 6 years because I felt the others had worked for it. Now, anybody else just done it. It was mad, really, working against it. But having said that, I've never, ever compromised artistically. Maybe, but no, I haven't done that. And I'm still doing what I really like now. And what's so interesting, Martin, is the solo shows, the average age of our audience is about 45, which is insane because they weren't around when I was doing the early.
No.
And what's odd, if you take, which do you think that the 6 most successful songs over the last tours that went down best with the crowd were this is the last tour that we did. You won't believe this.
Go on.
Marley's, obviously. So long, obviously. Yeah. Berlin. Then 3 songs that are not recorded yet. Wonder, which is part of the punk project. When Love Goes Wrong, part of the project. Yeah. And 100 Wised Up Monkeys. Right? They're not even on it yet. And with no effort, it's there.
Okay, let's just go. If we can just go back to Pretty Paracetamol. We talked a bit about the melody of Pretty Paracetamol, but not the lyrics. So
everybody thought it was a drug song. The idea that all the druggies would sort of nudge me and go, yeah, we know what you're really talking about. But I mean, it was about the idea of the fact I'd never taken any painkillers. I'd never taken paracetamol in my life until I was 30. And I love the word. I love the alliteration of the Pretty Paracetamol. Hold you gently on my tongue. And it was a surreal love song to a tablet. And so I don't think I've ever talked about the lyrics of it particularly. I mean, people also you've got to remember, in a world where we became very successful with a non-English speaking audience, I think I've spent like most of my career with people singing along with choruses and not really understanding what the hell I'm talking about.
Well, that's one of the reasons I'm asking, because actually you're right. The lyrics of a lot of your songs are not you don't often talk about the sort of meaning of them. You might mention what the song's about when you're playing it live. I've heard that a number of times. But why did why did they use a bracket then called First Impressions and then Pretty Paracetamol? What was the thinking behind that?
Oh, the thinking behind that would have been probably the same way as, I mean, Radio 1 unofficially banned Remember Russia at one stage because it mentioned Russia. And I think probably at that stage they might have thought Pretty Paracetamol was a product. And so it would have been better to call it First Impressions. I imagine that's what it was. There was that kind of sensibility with radio pluggers in the 70s, in the late 70s. What you don't know is I was offered a deal by Stiff as me. The same tour that broke Elvis Costello, Ian Dury. Yes. Now, if I'd have done that, I think I was the cheeky chappie that would have done very well. That would have meant it would have come from England first. And I think I could have done really well on that tour. Don't you think so? Given the way I play and I entertain. If I did festivals with Ian Dury, and we did Pink Pop with Ian Dury and people like that, and they knew us quite well. And one of my heroes is Peter Jenner, obviously the manager of Ian Dury, manager of Pink Floyd, everything. And he said to me years before, this is in the very beginning, after I left Fischer-Z and I did this, that, and the other, he said, "You're a solo act. So that's your problem. You're a weird solo act." He said, "You're not a band person and people find it difficult to understand it." He said, "The name is absolutely brilliant. It's timeless. It's superb." But he said, "You just should have attached it to your forehead. And that's it." And he said, if you'd have put down, he said, "Do you know what you should have done? When you first died, my name's John Watts." Everybody thought, "Oh yeah, Amps, Watts. That's great. New Wave." He said, "You should have just called," he said, "you should have been, your stage name should have been John Fisher with a C in it." And he said, "Everything else for you then would have been automatic." I don't know what you think of that, Martin, but I've not mentioned that to people before.
I don't know. I'm not sure I would be 110% convinced on that myself. But I can see that. Are you more comfortable in a solo setting or a band? What's your sort of view? I mean,
I like doing solo shows much better than I like doing band shows because there's much more freedom. There's a basic plan. I've got a solid spine of stuff that I'll do behind everything. A great band show is a good thing. It's lovely to be doing it with other people. But for instance, I like it when it's much more experimental and you don't know what's going to happen. When we did the Oberhausen birthday party with 13 musicians,
looked
that
great.
was the best band show that's the best band show I've ever done. That's the thing I've enjoyed more than anything else. Because those people, I brought together a lot of people I respect from different eras. It was totally unrehearsed. We just ran through the songs in the sound check to work out what's going to happen.
Right.
And that was magic. I think people that made that show I'm seeing the reaction of people. It was quite extraordinary. It's not that I dislike doing band shows, but I prefer to play solo. Because then when I say solo, it means that if, for instance, I go to Australia, if I go there, and I will do. I'm going to go to Australia in 2026, I hope. And that's very important to me. If I go and do that, with what I do, I can play everything that's ever been in the catalogue. I can play it to you on an acoustic. And you get to play with different people. I've never done enough. Naturally, I should have done much more collaborating. But I did it by collaborating, by changing bands, in effect.
You do change musicians a lot between all the records.
I think there's more than 160 people that have done more than 30 gigs.
And that change is what, to freshen things up?
It allows you.
Why do you do that?
Some of the best, for me, the best record we've ever made is 13 Stories High by a mile. And the best, one of the solo records, the Iceberg Model is a very unusual record. If I have to choose them, Red Skies for its time, it was absolutely it captured the zeitgeist. It is what it is. And it's got good songs on it, but it's not, for me, it's not as good a record as 13 Stories High. Dear Phil, who's dead, and Steve Skolnik, who didn't like me at the time, they did a fantastic job. And the songs, all the song strength, everything's there on that record. And it's beautifully, beautifully engineered by Graham Bonnet. It's beautifully engineered. I love that one. People are quite surprised when they ask me for what my favorite record is. Iceberg Model. The experimental track on that, I got lots of reviews. I spoke to Brian Eno about it when I was in Paris. And Peter, there's funny things in their career. Like, you remember, you probably knew I recorded that Zulu album for Boosie Malonga in 1983 in Amsterdam. And Peter always said, when I worked at Real World, he said, you did a world music record 2 years before I did, which I did. But the thing is, you don't get recognition for it unless you've got a higher profile, really. I did all the things I wanted to do, but from a lower profile, so it didn't get noticed. When we did Ether, we were ahead. There was an album on Ireland called One Giant Leap, where they spent £300,000, went around the world and recorded. We did it, but we did it with a laptop at the same time. And everybody said, oh, it's like One Giant Leap. I said, no, One Giant Leap's pretty much like Ether. Yeah, I'm proud of the approaches. We were doing, when I did Big Beat Poetry with Ingo, that's one of the best tracks I've ever done, definitely. But we were doing poetry and hip hop in 98 on stages where everything was feeding back and screaming because they didn't have the technology for the decks and stuff then. And the idea of being in New York and playing hip hop with some of the big hip hop acts in the audience was unbelievable. And people don't even know I did that at all.
Okay, brilliant. Look,
back to the lyrics of that, if you want.
Yes.
It's usually it's all associated. It bounces off, really. The way that I think and the way that I work is sideways. It's lateral. So Paracetamol, as I say, with that, there's techniques on that are quite funny because obviously you've got tom-toms that are going doom doom, get doom doom, get doom doom. You got that going on, and that was influenced presumably by Howlett, and so it's got. Most of the new wave singles at the time were boom clang boom clang boom clang. They wouldn't have done that at all, and only when you get to bands like Pill, that's when they started to do more stuff like that, really. But the thing was, the guitar roll was totally different. It all worked. Paracetamol all worked around that riff, and it was a mixture of Anarchy in the UK and in terms of the tonality of it, and also things like songs from Sound of Music. It's like, do you see what I do? I do there, and then the melody. All melodies are nicked from something else. But what was good about it is the idea of all Fischer-Z stuff was very quirky from the beginning. And Paracetamol represented that very accurately because at the end, when I'm doing the Lost Control, the guitar business stops sounding like a guitar and it's all squirrely and mangled and phasey. And live-wise, that used to be massive. So I think Paracetamol absolutely represented the way it was an archetypal first album song. There were two types. There were the Paracetamols and things like the French Letter, and they were like that. And then there was Remember Russia, which is very directly reggae influenced because Steve Little was very reggae influenced, and also The Worker. The Worker was very popularly produced. When I do the worker now, I can still play the worker. I can play the worker solo, but you're doing it like in D minor as opposed to in A minor. And it's actually got more credence, I think, when it's sung a bit lower because it stops being squeaky. Because you get people like the bands that came before. On Paracetamol, there's some very high stuff on Paracetamol. There's very high stuff on French Letters. There's very high stuff on the worker. But then you're in the same stratosphere as people like the bloke from Yes, John Anderson. You're up there. I can sing up there, but he sung it from his head. I could sing with my chest that high. I could sing a top C like a concert singer tenor. I could sing that high. The highest note that we've ever done on record is on the French Letter, though. When do 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 beep. It's ridiculously high.
Yeah. Well, I've just listened to Pretty Paracetamol on the Pink Pop set in 81. It was fast, but it was also, an incredible version. Like all of the arrangements of it. It was just I hadn't really heard that song like that previously. So, as you say, it's a big song.
Oh, very big. And also at that stage, we had the keyboards going and we had my guitar.
Yeah, you did, yeah.
And then we had the extra guitar as well. So you've got the effect of the two guitars.
Back in 2022, John and Steve Skolnik got together to chat about those early days of Fischer-Z. We can now hear that. Steve started by talking about when he first met John.
So where should we start? Whereabouts in time? I've got very, very early memories that we met. I was playing in a folk sort of setting at Brunel.
Yeah.
And I was singing my old Simon and Garfunkel stuff and songs that I liked and played on the guitar. And then I think you wandered up to me and said, hello, would you like to hear some songs? And I said, yeah. And then you dragged me back to your dirty little house.
Yeah.
Some grubby.
Beryl the Bus Clippy.
Yeah, it was a grubby place. But and then you sat and played for a good hour. And I thought, oh my God, this chap is seriously a talented guy. What's this all about?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's how it started, really.
It definitely did. Also, there's the other thing, because we started university at the same time. What I remember, and I'm sure your interests were the same, you look around to see the interesting people and the pretty girls, generally speaking, when you arrive in a place like that.
Yeah, not necessarily in that order.
The other way around. And I remember, that bloke is an interesting looking bloke. And then you did all the music and stuff as well. Yeah, I definitely remember that. I also remember moving on from there to coming up when we first started to play, because obviously you played the piano really well, and I was twiddling around on the acoustic. But I remember working out songs in remarkable parts of North London with your equally remarkable parents, your amazingly beautiful, wonderful mum, and your completely eccentric, wonderful father, and us playing in their living room with your piano. I
remember that very, very clearly, that you sat and played again. I remember on the couch. It was just amazing that you just had so much to want to do. I just couldn't believe that amount of desire, really. I mean, I just played for myself and played to keep myself happy, but you just wanted to make other people hear what you had to say. It never really occurred to me to be like that. So yeah, it was extraordinary. I do also remember the main point of that period was that we built the terrace together in the garden. There were some very big heavy stones that we were able to move about for my dad. And so that was a high point. And the piano still exists. The piano at the moment is in another house and carries on, and I still play it and still write on it.
Oh, that's
but wonderful. I remember we wrote Amsterdam there.
Yeah.
And I think The Worker, and you'd remember more than me, but I remember we did write in the hall there. That's right.
Yeah.
It just sort of worked. I mean, it was just sort of, I've always liked your tunes. I'm not sure how much I liked you, but I really liked your tunes.
No, everybody has that effect.
It was, you're a tunesmith. You know, it's not easy to do. You know, I listen to songs now, and I think those were all choices. People made choices continuously about what tune, what's the next note that I'm going to, and you just knew what you wanted to hear. It's a good thing. It's a very good thing. I'm not that. I hear tunes on the piano. I continuously hear tunes on the piano, but I don't hear melody lines in the same way.
Mm. No,
Are you driven by the melody?
I'm kind of driven by words to start with, but just drive generally. I've been asked to do a couple of seminars, songwriting seminars, and all sorts of other things. I don't do many because I'm too unpopular. Because if you work with the establishment people, I encourage young artists to be individual and to do, to try and do something different. But drive is the most important thing for success, I think, with respect to music, and luck, of course. Luck plus drive, because there's so many people that are good that never get the chance. But the drive and the push is important. I think also, if you take the general description of art is an individual's expression of the world. And if you're lucky, it has a universality and it appeals to lots of people. And quite simply, word and songwriting is I'm an artist and my area is songwriting, really. And that's what drives me all the time.
It's having something to say. I don't think I had that much to say. I've got a lot of thoughts about the world. How can one not? But I don't think I had a particular aspect, but you had a desire to express that feeling of what you've of what the world meant to you. So I'm saying, so your songs were interesting in as that was a take on what was going on in the world for you very personally, your own life and what was around you. And I think that's a good thing. It makes it an interesting repertoire. I mean, I listened to some stuff the other day. I just cannot believe what people are singing about. It's of absolutely no consequence, but there you go.
It's escapism, though, isn't it? If you look at, in times of crisis, people, if you look at the different wartime songs and things, people back up to that. But I always took a lot of world events and what was going on around us very personally and put them into songs.
And you go back to a song like Remember Russia. So that was something that you really felt. You had anxiety over that issue, which propelled you to write that song.
Another scar we can't heal. Another warning. Another warning. Children
because that was everybody says that's a very, when they interview me now, they say it's a very early Green song. So I was talking about the Russian satellite poisoning the Canadian forest. And we also did, and yes. Do you remember going to fish ponds and holding up fluorescent light bulbs in Bristol?
That's right. Yeah, we were terribly frightened. Everything was lit up. We knew there was radiation there. We didn't know what it meant.
No, that's right. But we had what I didn't realize, because like you were the same, really. We were from a different universe. You hadn't studied every record in the world and knew who played on Lou Reed's first album and who produced what. We weren't academics of the music world, whereas a lot of the people around us were people who did the same sort of music that weren't punks, people that had the energy of punk. People like Elvis Costello have been around for years. Annie Lennox have been knocking around. They were all much more aware. They got on the record labels they wanted and did this sort of stuff. I think Steve Little knew a bit more than we did. But coming from that angle, that just changed the way. The reason Fischer-Z was different is we just weren't like the other bands. I was writing lyrics which were not. They weren't totally Anglo-Saxon. I mean, everybody was writing about Thatcher. People were writing about unemployment, racism. It was very English stuff, wasn't it? That's what the punks were on about. They were street punks. I was interested in a bigger picture. So I was writing songs about, Russia, America. And specifically, when I got as far as Red Skies, I was writing absolutely about the state of the Cold War in 1980. You know what I mean? So that's where it came from. So, and also, I don't know if you remember, I was accused critically a number of times of it being kind of a journalese, more like an observer rather than being involved. That's fair enough. I think that was fair comment. But I mean, what I think people didn't realize, and you did because you're close, but you did realize I did actually feel those things. They did have a big effect on me, the things I wrote about, the political. I mean, I was writing about multinational companies and all that kind of stuff, and it sort of worked that way. One thing I would like to say at this point is that I believe that the reason Fischer-Z worked, and in the beginning, and the reason it was a band, is because of the contrasting characters between myself and Steve. I tend to be very impatient, very impetuous, and Steve's extremely patient, very bright, and was allowed me to be potty. And our combination together was remarkable. And when we started to find the others, we then found Stevie Little, the man from Uttoxeter, and then it all started to happen. But I think that we wouldn't have, without the two of us meeting, there would definitely not have been anything like what Fischer-Z became. I'd have probably gone soloing, because in the beginning, Steve, it certainly was a band, wasn't it? When we first got going, there was the two of us. And then we found Steve, who came down. He thought he was going to join a punk band. He came down from Uttoxeter, and he ended up joining a band that certainly I would categorize what we did now as art punks. Do you know why? Because we were interested, like everybody else had leather jackets, didn't they? And they had leather jackets and green hair, and I had that kind of Zoot-Suity, Bowie influenced, Roxy influenced stuff. And I think that we came from a different place, didn't we?
I think what was interesting as well, though, because we first started and we had Mark as a guitarist.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
And so it was interesting because you had a clear idea, which I didn't necessarily understand, because you were listening to the Sex Pistols and I was not getting it. And you really were opposed to that kind of guitar work and that kind of, sort of, I suppose, without being too mean, it's a bit indulgent and it hasn't got much to do with the point of the song. And it gives somebody who's a very good musician to have their moment, but it's got nothing to do with the point of the song. That was your first act, was to remove that component. And I think it was absolutely necessary. I don't think my removal was necessary, but certainly as far as the guitar was, I understood why that had to go. And you also then had to become a better guitarist.
Yeah, sure. But the thing was, having been a drummer to start with, what I was doing was providing energy and a rhythm. And therefore, all your keyboards provided the color and the textures.
That's right.
And also, Dave Graham's bass lines, what he played and what we encouraged him to play were actually very melodic. So therefore, you didn't need the same role from the guitar. You just wanted the energy and the drive from the guitar. Plus, there's the sheer fact that singing live, trying to do that and play, it meant I kept the guitar, I couldn't play complex across the rhythms guitars really. But I only had the Telecaster, the electric guitar, a very limited amount of time before we got that lineup and the recording going.
Sure.
I've been.
It was a very quick thing. We didn't have a lot of time to be who we were going to be. It was very, very fast. I was down the other day in Hammersmith, the site of the old Greyhound. Yeah. And, we played some pretty, tough places, actually. And so that was just, we didn't have as much time as the Beatles had to get together and work out everything.
No,
it was pretty fast. And so it was work in progress.
Yeah. For me, the very fast nature of everything that happened caused enormous amounts of personal confusion. Because if you aim to do something, like we were both at university, and I was there a year longer than you, having taken a year out of it. And so we came from this background straight into that music. We were playing music, obviously, while we were at university as well. We were doing clubs at the same time. But the idea of coming from, mental hospitals, working with psychopaths, working with 16-year-old, maladjusted kids and everything else, things like, I remember one of the punk bands, I can't remember what it was, one of them was saying to us, "Oh my God, it's really dangerous out there. People will burn your ankle with a cigarette." And I remember that a year before that, I'd had a psychopath in a kitchen with a broken bottle trying to kill me. So therefore, a punk club didn't actually seem that threatening. And also your attitude, you were much more worldly as well. And you'd seen all sorts of bits and pieces. So we weren't actually impressed. There's one story I have to get you to comment on, because there's stories coming through, which I've written, there's about 70 of them. I've written 70 200-word stories. And one of the star stories for me is the Sid Vicious incident at the Speakeasy. And people don't believe me, Steve. They don't believe that story. And it's all absolutely true. I've got to, I say, you'll see the text of that. I'll send it to you at some point. But what do you remember about that? I know we're bouncing straight off of it, but it's just a good thing to talk about.
No, I remember it very, very clearly. We were very happy to get the gig. It was a big club to get to in London. And we strolled in there and we set up, and the crowd were quite a distance. They weren't up close to us. And we started playing, and then somebody started wandering towards us. And I didn't know who he was from Adam, because I'm not that well informed. And he comes over to my keyboard, actually, and sort of starts dabbing at it, and I swat him away. And then I still had no idea who he was. And then it's only then that Billy, our wonderful roadie, comes up behind him, chucks him over his shoulder, picks him up like a fly, throws him over his shoulder, and drags him to the back. Which was all quite fun, actually. We just carried on playing, thinking not much more about it. I don't think he approached your guitar, because maybe he was a bit more scared of you. And that was the incident until we come off stage. And then we're told that's Sid Vicious. And I said, right, okay, what's he all about? Well, he's here with Nancy. But it all kicked off because the bass player from the Jam took took an unpleasant shine to him. And then about half an hour later, Sid returns, having been to hospital. And what an extraordinary thing. And the after part for me is we were once playing a gig somewhere in the world up north. And I told this girl, there was a couple of large lasses that decided they liked me or us or what. I don't know. Who knows what part of it. They were always rather large. I mean, there's me as like, I'm not that big. But anyway, they fancied it. And in conversation, I told about our Sid Vicious moment. And they looked at me with absolute hatred and said, "Where's Billy? We're going to kill him." Because he transported Sid out the building. And that was the nightmare for them. They couldn't believe that we'd done anything so disgusting. I suppose our lack of respect didn't go down well either.
No, I tell you what's interesting. I know a lot more about that story now. First of all, what I didn't realize is that Weller was there as well. It was Weller that actually sorted Sid, because Sid had been telling them that they'd ripped off the Beatles. That's what annoyed Weller. Now, what I did see that you probably didn't, because you were playing over your shoulder, I did see the point where the pint glass was stuck in the side of Sid's head. Well, it just crashed the glass and stuck in Sid's head.
You saw the moment.
Yeah, I saw it at the back, because you're doing more. I'm playing guitar and looking out. You're looking at other things.
I'm looking down. Yeah.
And then I found out it doesn't say it's our gig, which is most annoying, but it's a very famous in several of the different punk books written about punk and written about that period, because that would have been, I think that was 77. Because if you remember, the guy who produced our first Wax Dolls single, Richard Gottra, was actually in the audience with he had like a sandy suit. I don't know if you remember that. He'd come to see us. Now, I was worried at that stage that it would put him off, because he's this American guy, this English punk's doing this and other. What I didn't realize, because I now know Richard Gottra quite well, he's a truly wonderful man. He's retired now, really. But he started all the labels in New York with the Ramones. He knew all the punks. He'd signed all the punks. He signed, talking.
I knew he'd come from Blondie. He'd done Blondie before us.
Yeah, exactly. But I didn't realize the labels that he ran. He was absolutely. So I was concerned. Oh my goodness, he's with that. He had like Somerset Maugham sandy suit, and it looked really nifty. I thought he's going to be really threatened by this.
I think he had some dodgy shoes, as I recall. They were a little bit sort of beige.
He did. But the thing about him was he actually, I think he has a very tough New York Jewish background. The guy is, what a lovely man. I've seen him a couple of times in New York since. But what was strange was, I think we were unlucky not to have him produce the rest of the record, don't you think, after he did the beginning, because he was a name as well. Because one of the things about the early Fischer-Z that people don't realize, they say, well, why wasn't it successful in England? When I look back on it, first, there were two huge reasons for it. As we got ticking, we weren't connected with the English business particularly, and it got going in Europe so fast. But if you have a name producer, which at that stage Gottra was, or Martin Rushent produced the Stranglers, produced the Buzzcocks, we'd have been part of that English club. And we weren't in the beginning. And I felt, Steve, I don't know whether you felt the same, our very
very rapid success in Europe actually made it more difficult to get back through the British thing. But now I look back, and when we do tours, for instance, the number of people who turn up in England is amazing. And it did make an impression. And we were playing to, obviously we did whistle tests and all those kind of things. But the Europhone thing overshadowed it a bit, didn't it?
My sense is, and it carries on now, especially what we've done to ourselves with our Brexit friends, is that it struck me, the contrast, and you might be right about the producer and how that had an effect on the whole industry in England. Was he a fashionable enough guy, etc.? Because if you have Martin Rushent, people are going to take a different kind of attitude, definitely. It's very important, the producer and their profile and who they've done and what respect they have in the industry. But I still think that it was when we touched down in Europe, it was a completely different level of professionalism of the people that were working for the record companies. It seemed like the English lot were sort of happy amateurs in comparison. So I think there are two aspects to why England was not happening in the same way. I also think the name was never going to appeal to the English audience as much as it would to a European audience.
I think that's true. I mean, everybody thought I was an Australian or a German. But I think one thing that affected it, and what I've been told by a lot of the European media, is that Europe was desperate to get something of the punk and the new wave. They wanted to get that on their radio, but lots of the bands just didn't have the melody. And we had melodies and songs, and that's what stood us in extremely good stead. Obviously, the Police had the same sort of situation. Yeah, because suddenly, I mean, the Police, the three-piece, that band. Obviously, we did the Phillips sort of with them. Didn't we? I mean,
we had a good gig with them.
Extraordinary. Yeah. And I also did lots of touring in the end with the Red Skies album, with the Dire Straits lot. But Dire Straits were more traditional. They were still quite a traditional rock band, really. Yeah, I mean, the Police did it, and they looked for us on that level. The other thing was, again, me not knowing who people were. We had very, very, very high level art people working with us, which I didn't realize. Our art director, who's the first guy, I've forgotten his name now, I'm sad to say, John Pash then took over from him. Now, John Pash designed the Rolling Stones' tongue, for instance. And when we had the photos done by, what was his name? A very, very famous rock photographer who I've completely forgotten about.
We had Stedman. We had Stedman do the wonderful.
Ralph Stedman, yeah. That
was a great thing.
Yeah. And he sent me recently, he sent me a signed copy of the things that he did for Remember Russia single. So,
oh, great.
What was his name? Anyway, the photographer who done everybody, I'd never heard of him. He did our photos. There was a series of photos, people would have seen it, and people who know us very well. The early photos of Fischer-Z, where there's the mirror, where I'm in the mirror and then somebody else is.
That's right. Yeah, there was some good artwork, to be fair. There was.
Really stylish. And those kind of people. And I think, again, and we had our champions in the UA office, which really helped us internationally. I mean, to name but one, to name Terry Berg, she was our complete champion and made sure
that's right.
we got going in Europe. But it was quite funny. I think one thing we should say about it is when we first met up, again, like you were, because I was a little bit younger than you, and you were determined to show me the world. And I remember the big contrast for Steve and I was the first time we went to Amsterdam together, and when we were first doing music together, and Steve was showing me the world. And then when we went back again, we must have gone back to do one of, I can't remember which, was it Remember Russia? We did the sort of Top of the Pops in Holland. I think it was the first time we went abroad.
That's right.
It was snow, it was really cold. And it was, the contrast between it was just amazing, because we were then, in those days, record companies put you business class food, and I stayed and there was hotels like I'd never seen before. And so it's quite a contrast. The same thing happened to me in America, actually, from hitchhiking at one stage in the strange buses through to being, picked up with the record company stuff. So a big contrast there, definitely.
Yeah. No, it's a lovely thing to, I still think, and it's very hard to explain to people outside of the music world or the band world, that it's a very unique experience to share that progression, that coming from nothing to something with four people is very, very powerful. And I think, I know you've gone and done a lot of your solo work, although now you have your more steady people. It's a lovely thing to share those experiences with.
Definitely. And the longer that goes on, the better. I think because initially, the people in Fischer-Z, we all came from very different places. None more so than Dave, really, who came from a totally different place from us. That's a different conversation. But in terms of, because we weren't a tribe like many of the bands who, for instance, had all been or are all exactly the same age with exactly the same background that wanted to play punk guitars that all listened to the same music. We were totally different from that. And
Absolutely, yeah.
And that, I think, was to a degree a bit of a downfall, because we didn't actually have that. But it did give us certainly a unique musical perspective.
No, it was. I think it's very hard. I mean, I went through the process myself of putting a band together. It's a very difficult thing. I mean, luck is the only thing you can
Absolutely.
say. Who happens to walk in the room is, I knew when my bass player walked in the room, he was a Scottish guy. He'd been in the Berlin Blondes, and I just thought, you're my man. I just thought, you're my man. I think it was the same thing. Everyone talks about it now. It's with the Beatles. The Beatles only started when Ringo walked in the room. That was the beginning of the Beatles. And it's those energies and all the little subtleties of everybody, and their approach to life, their approach to music. They're very hard things to get right. It is luck, who's there on the day. And so we got pretty lucky, but not in that sense. Dave was an outlier. His worldview is totally different, probably, from ours.
We take responsibility. Dave's in a different world. That is for sure. That is for sure.
I mean, generally, most band people are always on the left side of politics because that's who they are.
Yes.
And so you have someone who's not on that side. They're going to feature.
Yeah, but also people's personal characteristics affect it so much. The other side of what you get from me, I've always been driven like a complete lunatic, as you know, Steve, and everybody else does. But that drive goes with an incredible impatience to do things very, very quickly. And if they don't happen quickly, I'm these days, because music with major record companies tended to be marketing driven. If you wanted to release 3 records a year, they just wouldn't let you. They wouldn't let you prepare it. Now, especially now at my age now, I want to get all the creative work I can. So I will, if I want to release 3 projects in a year, I will. It's going to be artistic driven. That's just the way it has to be.
But that's a good thing, actually.
It is a good thing.
Yeah.
But it means that in terms of driving and doing things, I do very, very radical things. I always have done. And that's been the cause. The other thing I would say, in the beginning, which I think Steve would verify, we were being managed by a friend of mine who then became a friend of everybody's. And he was absolutely dedicated to us. And he believed in us as a manager, and he did his best without any doubt. But he wasn't a music business person. A music business manager, some of the more radical decisions that I did, and I did earlier part of my career, would have been reined in by an experienced manager. They'd have known exactly what would happen. The manager, because he was my friend, he went with me. He would go with me, or he would go with what's going on very quickly. And that, if you get an old grey-head manager, at the point, I mean, for instance, the biggest thing, there's lots of big decisions. The decision that was Steve, which at that point, because Fischer-Z was a band, it was never a band. It was never a band, Steve, from the point in which you weren't there anymore. And it wasn't the same band because the band nucleus had gone. But the idea that, for instance, when I went on stage in Milan in 1981, I didn't know 10 minutes before I did it, I was going to leave the band at the height of its Red Sky success. I just decided it on stage, Steve. I announced it to the crowd, I announced it to the band, and I said I was gone.
Wow.
You'd
been thinking about it, obviously.
No, not really. Only about 2. I was fed up because we'd been radically overworked. Again, inexperience on the management front. I'd had no days off for 27 days. I could only eat rice. I was fed up. Now, most managers would have said, "Stop, forget it. No, no, really." And there are lots of things I've done before and since, which have been complete chaos. And I've had 8 different managements. This affects things. But now I've learned, and what I learned most from was my son, ironically, when he managed me for 2 years.
It's very, very hard as well, though, on the manager, because we've seen it now, and how, because something is happening and they've got interest and the record is wanted, the demand comes in and you've got to be here, there and everywhere. and they think, right, this is the moment. And they don't understand at all what it's like to have to play those songs every day, every night, because you've got to feel something to play something.
Definitely.
They don't get that bit. What they get is there's massive demand. I'm being offered loads of money, and you've got to go out there and do it. And we've seen so many people fall and end up hating the business because of that lack of understanding.
Yeah.
But it's a tricky one for them because they think, shit, I'm in a position now where I can really cash in on this, guys. Not because they personally want to make money, but they just want to make the most of the situation.
Sure.
And so they drive you. I mean, I just remember our early gigs. I couldn't believe, I thought it was being put together by a hamster. We'd be in Exeter, and then we'd be in Nottingham, and then we'd be in Torbay. I mean, what the fuck was that about?
Steve, let me tell you, it still exists, obviously. And obviously, people should know, obviously, some of you out there in the club would have seen Steve playing. How long ago was that now? We did the last stuff. You did those tours with me. On the
the last thing when we did the last work.
Yeah, that was that with Tris and Pete? I can't remember who was.
Yeah, which was great fun. It was really nice to see the world from a different perspective with some very professional guys. Actually, I thought it was lovely. It was 80 something. I've got the mug somewhere. We were out there. Grace Jones, all those characters we were with.
Yeah.
But that was well organised, and it was a pleasure to do.
Yeah, it was good. I think that that now, obviously, the industry. I've got a team of people around me, so actually control where I want to go and what's going on. You just have to do that.
Sure.
But the thing is, one thing that nobody will ever know, because sadly, the manager we were talking about, he died. But he was in an office. There's an office. It's a story which you've probably heard, Steve, that no one will ever believe. Once I'd left Fischer-Z in '81, we had an out of contract. I was taken into the EMI building, into the EMI offices, and I was told by the manager, by the bigwigs, okay, we're going to make you an offer you can't possibly refuse. Now, you knew me as a young man. If anybody said there's an offer you can't possibly refuse, you'd have bet your house on the fact I'd refused it, wouldn't you?
Absolutely. No way you would take that one.
I was offered a fortune. He said, look, you'll be secure for life. Do 5 more Fishers. He said, I don't care if you've left Fishers. I don't care. He actually said he doesn't care if I have 5 clockwork monkeys and myself, right? That's what he said.
Yeah.
So the manager was expecting me to accept the deal. When I didn't, I've never, ever seen anybody go that white as he went. I won't say who he is, but he went absolutely white and dragged me out the room. Said, what are you doing? What are you doing? I said, I don't want to be dictated to by a multinational company. I want to make a solo record, and I want to do it. And so I did, and I did a reasonable deal for a John Watts record. And with the politics being what they are, without being too much detail, the record was actually stiffed because they wanted to try and make sure I did another Fischer-Z record. I didn't understand the power, Steve, of a brand. You have to do that as an artist, a brand. I mean, look at the Rolling Stones. You read things by Keith Richards, although he didn't get on with Mick and all that. They understand the brand. They stick.
Sure.
And so now
there's quite a conflict there, though, isn't there? Because, again, if you're an artist and that's what drives you, it's not about the brand. And it's very difficult to put those two things together. And that's why you resisted it, because you didn't want to be put together like that.
No.
I mean, do you regret it? What's the feeling there?
No. I mean, the point is, the thing you have to look at now is, I'm still making relevant music now as I see it. I still think I do stuff that's as good as I've done before. It's always different. And people, thankfully, are still coming to see it. And so look at our contemporaries. I mean, a large number of them are dead, aren't they? Look at the number of them that started.
It's hard to go and see anyone. Yeah, I watched a Knopfler video last night on CNN. He looked like 150 years old. It was quite sad to watch. He can still play beautiful guitar, but my God, it's hard to see anybody of our era. That
and we've lost so many of the different people. I mean, again, it depends on lifestyle. Like we were never a particularly drugsy band, but it certainly knocked over loads of people. And the energy level, I mean, what I want to keep, like if I'm lucky, touch wood, is my energy level, because that's my unique talent more than anything else, is the drive, as you say, the drive and the push. Thanks, Steve, for having a chat at this stage. Still prepared to talk to me, which is pretty good, really. My honorary big brother, and always will be so, which means you've got to last for a hell of a long time.
Let's hope so. I hope we could have many more years. You're looking well again.
Cheers, man. Bye-bye.
All right, man. Take care. Bye for now.
Thank you for listening to the Fischer-Z 50th anniversary audio series. I hope you enjoyed it. Look out for the next episode. Come on.
Thanks, John, for those brilliant stories. The next episode features So Long from the Going Deaf to a Living album and Berlin from the Red Skies Over Paradise album. See you all then.